Well, I'm Deborah Woroff, and I've had ME/CFS since late July 1989, give or take a few days. And this is Dr. Kenny de Meirleir, who is really the foremost clinician in Europe working on ME/CFS, both as a doctor who treats patients and as a scientist who researches this disease. And he's pushed ahead a long way over the past 30 years. And I want to talk about some of the things we don't know as yet, or I don't know as yet. One thing I'd like to know, I know you've pioneered the use of GC-MAF, which is a chemical related to vitamin D and the vitamin D receptor. And how universally are you using that at the moment? Are you using it on all patients or ones who already have an advanced immune deficiency? Or how do you decide who should try the GC-MAF?
First of all, the patient has to be willing to use this.
Yes.
And secondly, we use it in those with high Nagalase activity, because Nagalase destroys our normal GC-MAF, the GC-MAF our body makes, and that's another predicate. And then we use it in those people where we certainly are not going to have an iris reaction, because if patients have an overload of infections, they have multiple infections.
Yeah.
This is the subgroup that is going to react badly on GC-MAF. So it's a very good thing to help patients with GC-MAF when they are relatively clean from infections.
What about the infectious pathogens would cause them to react badly to GC-MAF? I don't understand the connection.
You have to know that LPS, which is present in gram-negative bacteria in their walls, is a potent stimulator of macrophages. Okay? So if you have already overstimulated macrophages and you're going to add some GC-MAF, you can have a severe reaction. And it's not a complete reconstitution reaction like they say you see in HIV. I think it's different here.
Is it one of those Herxheimer reactions they talk about or not?
What is a Herxheimer reaction? At the time when Dr. Herxheimer and Jarisch described this, I think it was in 1890 or something, they didn't have any biological measures, so they only had a clinical picture of it. And it looks like a Herxheimer reaction. It looks like a cytokine reaction, and we've done some measurements of reactions of the immune system, and you see that there are some cytokines that are very activated in this kind of reaction.
Do you think we have any ideas yet, either in your work or other people's work, how the pathogens, whether the herpes family or some of the bacteria, how they change the immune system to be deficient?
We know that now, and again, this is an ongoing work now. It's not published yet.
Oh, this is what we're in the middle of.
We're in the middle of, and I think we will be able to publish that not in a distant period, how these bacteria do that in the ME patients, because there's still a difference between what they do in normal people and what happens here.
Yeah.
And so we cannot make any conclusions from the general literature.
Right.
Okay? So we have to do some real in vitro work to prove what the exact mechanism is here.
Yeah. Well, we've spent billions of dollars learning how the HIV virus affects this kind of change. Do you think it will turn out to have any similarity to HIV, or is it still too much of a guessing game to say?
Well, HIV is a complete retrovirus.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about retrovirus here. We're talking about other mechanisms. And so there may be some similarities, but it's not going to be the same.
Yeah, not too much to learn from that process.
Well, you can learn always from similarities.
Yeah, yeah.
But then it's more important to know what the dissimilarities are.
Right, and you're not telling me those until you're published. Okay, I understand that. Do you have any idea in your work as yet as to why such a large proportion of ME/CFS patients go on to have lymphoma? I think it's 20 times the rate as in the general population. Have you seen any glimmer of what the connection is there? Or is it just the destruction of the immune system?
There is, what is common in all ME/CFS patients is that their innate immune system, their non-specific immune system is activated, and that there's a disruption in the function of the cellular immune system. With a Th1, Th2 shift mainly, 85% has really Th2 dominance.
Yeah.
But there's also a T and B cell function problem, and so it's not a surprise that you have these kind of abnormalities and these kind of cancers. But why specifically lymphomas and then mainly B cell lymphomas develop? Again, this is something that is being looked at right now.
Yeah. Is it being looked at in Belgium or elsewhere?
Elsewhere too.
And one thing I was fascinated by, I saw an interview you'd done in Australia, and you mentioned that before puberty, the numbers of boys and girls who get this disease is about equal. Then you go to puberty and you have the beginning of extra estrogen production in the woman and extra testosterone in the man. And the upshot of that is that when you get to the middle of the life cycle, I think you chose 37 years as the average point, that the female is more vulnerable because of her estrogen. She's more vulnerable to the ME/CFS situation developing to a very high degree. Some people say 4-to-1, 80% female at that kind of age. And I was fascinated that you tied this to the effect of estrogen on the immune system.
It's one of the effects.
And I had never known this, and that makes for a shift from T1 to Th1 to Th2.
Yeah, and so that makes people more vulnerable for viruses, for intracellular infections, pathogens, for parasites, and that's common knowledge, and that really is the same, or is also true for autoimmune diseases.
Right.
For all autoimmune diseases, there is a preponderance in women.
And no one knows why. Or do they know why, and I just haven't read it?
I think it's multifactorial, but the estrogens is one of the factors.
Yeah. Now, if I were to take some testosterone, do you think I might have a beneficial effect?
Well, a lot of people are taking DHEA.
I do
today.
take that, yes.
And DHEA has a low testosterone effect. And certainly if you take high doses of DHEA, which some people do, I don't recommend it, but that has some testosterone-like effect, which might shift some of the cells from Th2 to Th1. So new cells there will be more Th1, and that might protect against new infections.
Would it be an interesting experiment to try out-and-out testosterone augmentation? I mean, like they do with older men, sometimes the doctor will prescribe testosterone. I mean, you could possibly, for example, you could inject or use a patch to give me additional testosterone.
Well, you can predict what's going to happen.
What?
It's not going to have a big influence on the disease because there's already all sort of consequences in chronic patients, but they're going to have less infections.
And more beard.
They're gonna and more beard, yeah. So they're gonna say this winter I had less infections compared to last winter.
Yeah.
But I don't expect it, and they might be a little stronger because it's anabolic. but I don't think it will have a major impact.
Right. This isn't going to be a major avenue for therapy research.
No.
Nothing there. I want to ask you something. I had 2 back surgeries. They were part of the same exercise in 2010. And I was not very well treated in the hospital. I was denied rehab. And after that, I was significantly sicker than I had been previously, and therapies that had worked previously, like ozone infusion, no longer worked. I'm not going to ask you about that specifically since you weren't around treating me, but is there a recommendation you would make for other people who may have a major surgery in the future who have CFS? What do you recommend to your patients to get through surgery without the kind of disaster I've had?
Well, there is already a chronic inflammatory response in the CFS patients.
Right.
And any kind of surgery just increases that.
Yeah.
And so the length of time for recovery will be longer. That's one. And secondly, we have to maybe try very carefully to break down a little bit the inflammatory response, bring it down. Because it's the inflammatory response that gives all these complaints.
Is there anything you could do on day 1 and 2 after the operation that might help?
But that really depends on what operation it is. That needs to be looked at on an individual basis. If you go to the dentist and have a few teeth removed, it's different from major back surgery.
Okay, well, let's take major back surgery. Any thoughts that I could berate my surgeon with?
Well, it needs to be discussed what kind of anti-inflammatories can be used in these patients, because again there's a chance of stomach upset and bleeding and so on. So there's a lot of things that can happen. So I think this should be looked at case by case, but we know that the inflammatory response is much stronger in ME CFS patients than in normal people.
Do you think nutrition would make a difference? I know some hospitals start giving nutrition with almost any major surgery. They'll give you IV amino acids on the second day, and some don't. Do you think that?
But that's not nutrition.
Oh.
That's not part of nutritional. That's just support. So I don't think that plays a major role.
Or other kind of nutritional infusions, or.
But that needs to be started way before. And we do that also on an individual basis.
Oh, what sorts of nutritional remedies do you encourage your patients?
Well, these are diets made on client basis.
Yeah.
Depending on what underlying problems they have, if they're gluten intolerance, if they are fructose malabsorbers or whatever.
Yeah.
So that really is made individually.
There isn't anything that is generally ameliorative to the inflammation situation or anything like that.
Yeah, you can. There's some omega-3. There are different kind of things that you can bring down the inflammation somewhat. But again, I don't know what impact that's going to have.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter Behan did a long time, 20 years ago, a study on omega-3 fatty acids and the inflammation in ME patients, and showed that 85% or 80%, I don't remember exactly, of the patients were benefiting from it. And this study is completely forgotten.
Yes, I've never seen it. It's in PubMed. I can look it up.
Yeah.
Let's wrap out and then go back to it.
Okay, I just want to ask one more kind of technical pathogen question. I have found that I have a great deal of mold and mold toxins in my system. No one had ever tested for this, and there are a group of people out in Nevada who complain quite audibly that they have a great deal that's been ignored. And I know I looked it up. I have the kind of toxins that condition people for liver cancer and kidney cancer. Have you worked at all on molds?
No, but we, when there's a reason to, we test people for them, and it's either food-borne or it's origin in food or environment, and certainly in houses that are very closed and windows are never open and there are humid, you find a lot. And I think Richie Shoemaker's work is very important here, and
Yeah.
he's come up with some strategies to treat that.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you were able to come to New York, and I look forward to seeing your research published and to seeing more of you in the future. Thank you very much.
If you would like to sponsor MECFS Alert, please contact us at mecfsalert@gmail.com. Help us to help